Now on Overnights,
I believe in reason and common sense.
Leith Van Onselen from Macro Business with the Treasury of Common Sense.
Common sense never goes out of style.
How are you, buddy?
Yeah, good, thanks, Phil. How about yourself?
I'm okay. Australia commits economic suicide by gas. Tell us about this.
I've been banging on about the whole gas issue on Radio 2GB and 4BC for, a couple of years, really. And really, Australia's just shooting itself in the foot, and we've seen some absolute disaster. Some more disastrous gas events this week. So just to recap, the Rudd-Gillard Labor government back in the early 2010s made the reckless decision to approve liquefied natural gas exports out of Gladstone, Queensland, without requiring that gas first be supplied to Australians. They basically allowed the building and then the opening up of these massive export terminals out of Gladstone, Queensland, which basically freeze our gas, put them on ships, and then sell it to Asia, mostly to China. And gas exports aren't uncommon around the world. There's other places that do it. Western Australia does it, for example. The United States does it. A whole bunch of places do it around the world. But every other jurisdiction except for the east coast of Australia, which has a gas that exports gas, has a reservation policy whereby they're required to supply the domestic market first before they can export. But for some crazy reason, we decided not to do that on the east coast. And this policy error has made, as I said, East Coast Australia the only gas exporting jurisdiction in the world not to have a domestic reservation policy. And what that's meant is that we pay the highest gas prices in the world out of every gas exporting jurisdiction, which is crazy stuff. So despite doubling, so these gas export terminals came online in 2015 in Gladstone in Queensland. And since that happened, we've actually doubled the production of gas on the east coast of Australia. Yet we're actually supplying 25% less gas to the domestic market. So what they've effectively done is they've ramped up production, but they've hoovered the gas offshore and they're selling most of that to China. And on the east coast, we export nearly 3/4 of our gas, but we starve the domestic market of gas. And as a result, the east coast gas price has roughly tripled since these exports came online. So back in 2015, we were paying around $4 a gigajoule for our gas on the east coast. Now we're paying $12 plus. It depends on the day, but average sort of around $12 now. So it's basically tripled, but it does go up and down. So a couple of days ago it was at $16, for example. And this surge in gas prices on the east coast has actually driven up your electricity bills as well. So if you're listening to this in Sydney and Brisbane, your electricity prices, as you all know, have gone up as well. And part of the reason for that, it's not the only reason, but part of the reason is this surge in gas prices. So it's a double whammy. It's driven up gas prices, which has harmed manufacturing. I live in Victoria where we heat our homes with gas. It's pushed up those prices, has made the cost of living a lot more expensive. But then it's also driven up all of our electricity prices because gas is one of the price setters in the wholesale electricity market. So during the election campaign, the coalition promised to implement an East Coast gas reservation policy. It was actually excellent policy. And what they wanted to do is they want to basically force the East Coast gas producers to divert their uncontracted gas. So at the moment, they've got these contracts that start to expire in 2030 all the way through to 2035 to supply China mostly. But there's also uncontracted gas, which is basically they sell in what's called the spot market, which is the uncontracted gas market. The price fluctuates every day. And the coalition wanted to force them to, instead of selling that uncontracted gas overseas, which they're doing, to supply the domestic market to bring down prices. And the coalition promised to lower the East Coast gas price to below $10 a gigajoule from, as I said, $12, but can be more than that depending on the day. And the counterfactual to not doing this, Phil, is that if we don't have a reservation policy and we don't fix this problem, we're actually, despite the fact that the East Coast exports nearly 3/4 of its gas, we're actually scheduled to start importing gas, to open up import terminals in Port Kembla in New South Wales, and then also in Victoria later, and then possibly South Australia. It was going to be late this year, but the timetable keeps getting pushed out, but it could be next year or the year after. And when we start importing gas, the price is actually going to rocket even higher because at the moment we're basically paying the international price, but the export parity price. What that is, it's the international price, but before you've liquefied and before you've shipped it. So that the liquefaction process and shipping adds like another $3 a gigajoule, or more than that, often. But we'll effectively be paying the current price of plus a significant margin above that. And it could go up to $20. We don't know. So we really want to avoid that. But unfortunately, Labor's resource minister during the election, Madeleine King, dismissed the coalition's gas policy, called it a thought bubble. Just last week, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, actually I think it was the week before, claimed that the coalition's gas reservation policy was, quote, plucked out of a cocoa packet. I think I mentioned that a few weeks ago.
Yeah, no, I thought it was quite clever, actually.
Yeah, well, a clever comment, but a stupid comment as well.
Yeah, of course.
So what these comments suggest is that Labor's election victory has basically scuttled the prospect of reservation, or that's how it seems. And the upshot is that while we export nearly 3/4 of East Coast gas, which most of that goes to China, we don't have reservation. East Coast Australia is facing the prospect of having to import LNG. We're facing shortages. We're facing sky-high prices. And those sky-high prices will send electricity price higher. And that's going to push up inflation, send more manufacturing broke because gas, industrial heat from gas and just electricity more generally are inputs in the manufacturing process. And if you drive up the cost of that, we become less competitive. We're going to send all this stuff offshore. Now, this is a long-winded introduction to what has happened this week, which just adds even more fuel to the idiocy fire. So this week we saw Australia's gas idiocy basically mushroom and become worse. So Petroleum Australia, which is like a industry newsletter, reported that the country's largest liquefied natural gas exporter on the East Coast, they're called Australia Pacific LNG, which is partly owned by Origin Energy, they've agreed to a substantial price reduction on their contracted gas with China, and the contract with China's China Sinopec, which is a Chinese Communist Party-owned energy firm. So currently, this Asia Pacific LNG supplies China with East Coast liquefied gas. They provide about 7.6 million tonnes a year, which is huge. It's a massive amount, and what they've actually agreed to is to cut the price for Chinese buyers. And the reason why they want to cut the price is because the international gas price has fallen a bit, and under the contract terms, they have to renegotiate it every couple of years when the price falls. So what this is basically going to do, it's going to lower the cost for Chinese buyers of our gas at the same time as Australians are paying higher and higher prices for our gas. So this new contract price is going to be as low as $13.50 gigajoule. Now, when this price cut was announced a couple of days ago, Australia's East Coast spot price, so that's the current trading price, was traded at $16. Now, and local contract prices, so this is stuff under contract, not available on the fluctuating instant market, is tracking around $14 gigajoule. So what this means is that Australian East Coast gas is going to be cheaper in China than it is in Australia.
Yeah.
Which is just nuts. And that's despite the fact that it costs, $3 or so to liquefy the gas and then to ship it.
Yeah.
So, this is clown show stuff, Phil. And just to make it worse, Japan and China, so Japan mostly gets West Coast gas, but China gets East Coast gas. Japan and China are both receiving more gas than they need from Australia and actually re-exporting a profit. So they're getting at these sort of lower prices and then they're reselling it in international markets for a profit and making money off it. So the obvious question here is, why the hell are Australians being starved of their own gas and forced to pay more than, some Asian nations who we sell our gas to? And the idiocy got even worse, Phil, because just after this was reported earlier this week, and a consortium from Abu Dhabi in the Middle East has launched an $18.7 billion takeover bid for Australian gas giant Santos. And they run to export LNG trains out of Gladstone. So they're also sucking up our East Coast gas and selling it offshore to Asia. So now the Middle East want in, and they want to buy that export train. So potentially Australia could lose critical national energy assets to a Middle Eastern, conglomerate. And you have to ask the question, why are Australians the last in line for their own gas? Why are we being starved of our own gas, which is forcing up our cost of living? I live in Melbourne, as I said, and we use gas for heating. So we're paying, through the nose to heat our homes. I've got a gas stove. or gas water, water. Manufacturers are paying through the nose for their gas, which is sending a whole bunch of manufacturers broke. We have the smallest manufacturing share in the advanced world. We've just seen our last major plastics manufacturer shut down last year. Our last architectural glass maker shut down this year. We've seen a whole bunch of manufacturers threaten to close or downsize. We've lost fertiliser makers. The reason why the companies have left is because of expensive energy costs, primarily gas. So what are we doing here? And these super high gas prices are also forcing up our electricity prices, which again feeds into everything in the economy. If Australia doesn't have cheap energy, we don't have a modern economy. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
And it is the bedrock of a modern economy. And yet we've got this clown show happening whereby we're the only place in the world on the East Coast that doesn't reserve our gas for domestic use first. And we've got these foreign-owned gas companies, and I'm saying even Santos, it's trade on the Australian Stock Exchange, but it's primarily foreign-owned. Like the people who own the shares are offshore. So we have all these foreign-owned gas companies which are basically pillaging the East Coast for its gas, starving the East Coast consumers of gas, forcing up our prices, causing our manufacturing sector to move offshore and go broke, which costs us jobs, makes us a less diversified economy, pushes up the whole cost base throughout the economy. And this is all happening at the same time as the Albanese government wants to build 1.2 million homes over 5 years. That's their housing target. Well, guess what, Phil? One of the main inputs to building homes is bricks, right? But Brickworks requires, which is one of the major makers of Australian bricks, they require gas, to make the bricks. And if you make gas expensive, you make bricks expensive, and therefore pushes up the cost of housing. So that's just one, mere microcosm of the sort of costs we're dealing with here. But the fact of the matter is Australia is the second biggest gas exporter in the world. We're the biggest coal exporter. We have tons of uranium. We should have the cheapest energy in the world, or some of the cheapest energy in the world. But instead, through idiotic policy and utter neglect from our policymakers, and who just allow these companies to run riot on us and do whatever they want, we're getting absolutely shafted here. And the fact of the matter is, Phil, Australia's gas belongs to Australians. Our interests should come first, and without reservation, without reserving our gas and forcing it to be, supplied to Australians first at a reasonable cost, this energy inflation is going to continue to rise. The cost of living pressures will remain. Inflation will remain higher than it should be. And Australia's economy is going to continue to deindustrialise.
Yeah, right.
It is that serious.
Always make a lot of sense. That's why this is the Treasury of Common Sense. And if people want to find out more information, Leith, where do they go to, mate?
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Just go to macrobusiness.com.au.